Hi, welcome to the Android Fundamentals video course. This course is about the fundamental basic building blocks of Android applications. During this course, we'll look at all the pieces that you need to learn about in order to build an Android app, from activities, through layouts, through intents, and all the additional pieces you need in order to build an Android application. In order to get started, I'd like to begin with the developer.android.com website. You can see here I'm at developer.android.com. In fact, I'm on an index page there. And this is the home page for everything you want to know about Android. Now, I will recommend alternative resources as we get later into the course, but this is always where you get started, and we will take a look at this section in some detail. Interestingly enough, however, I want to look at a page here that isn't easily accessible directly from the menus. I mean, I do want to go through the menus, but it's not immediately obvious how to find this thing that I like to call, or they call, the Android dashboards. In fact, the easiest way to get to the Android dashboards is just to Google them. So I'm going to say Android dashboards, and you will see that the first link will take me exactly where it is I want to go. And these are the Android dashboards. Let me make that a little bit bigger. Now, what I want to see on this page is this chart and this graph over here. Of course, we have to have a pie chart, don't we? You'll notice in this chart that there are columns for version numbers and for code names, which all happen to be desserts, and then API numbers, as well as distribution, the percentage of accesses made by devices of that type during a time right before at the beginning of each month. Let me explain. When you are dealing with an Android application, you need to know what version number the application is written under. Also, the code name becomes very important because that tells you what features it has. And then the API number is used in many places throughout the SDK in order to tell you what options you have and what features are available. So let's take a look at these for a moment. You'll notice for the version numbers, they start with traditional numbers, 2.2, 2.3, 4.0. There does seem to be a gap at 3.0, and that's significant. Then they move on and on up to 5.0, 5.1, Lollipop, and then presumably the next one, which is the M Developer Preview at the moment, will be 5.2. The code names are all based on desserts. That began back in 1.3 with Cupcake, and they were always defined as a dessert in alphabetical order after that. So first there was Cupcake, and then D was Donut, E for Eclair, F here is Frozen Yogurt, Froyo. Gingerbread, the one that's missing is H, is Honeycomb. That was the first operating system defined specifically for tablets. That's really significant from our point of view because the programming model changed at that point, and we need to be aware of that. It's the Honeycomb operating system, the tablet, the first one designed for tablets, that defined the action bar, that defined fragments, that changed the development model for everything to come afterwards. After that, we have Ice Cream Sandwich, Jelly Bean, and then KitKat, interestingly enough, which for a long time was expected to be Key Lime Pie, but apparently at the last minute, Google did contact somebody at Nestle and said, do you mind if we use the name KitKat? And of course, Nestle, in a very intelligent move, went, absolutely, please, feel free to do so. At any rate, after KitKat came Lollipop, and right now, as I say, as of Google I/O in 2015, we are looking at an M Developer Preview. There are many different areas of speculation as to what M will be, possibly mango, possibly meringue. Of course, the best option I've seen so far is macadamia nut cookie, believe it or not. Finally, there are API numbers. The API numbers actually do go back to 1. They are all integers that are numbered consecutively. When we define an Android application, we will specify the minimum SDK number that our application supports, and that will be one of these numbers. Very typical in the industry these days would be 16 or 17 for Jelly Bean. If you want to go back to the gingerbread areas, sometimes it's worth it to go all the way back to 8. Which brings us at last to the actual distribution. Now, where does this data come from? As they say below it, This data is collected during a 7-day period ending in the first week of each month. This dashboard is updated every month to illustrate that. The data comes from accesses at the Google Play Store by Android devices. So Google will collect all of this information from the Android device accessing the Play Store and form this chart. Now we can see in the distribution here that the important thing to notice is how much of a distribution Froyo and Gingerbread have. Because as I mentioned, the programming model changed at Honeycomb. So ideally, we would like to focus on everything that's ice cream sandwich or above. We see that as of June 1st, Froyo and Gingerbread together are approximately 6% of the market. So it's a very small number. And what you don't know from looking at this chart is how it has changed over time. Basically, Gingerbread and to some degree Froyo has been losing roughly 1 to 2% a month for about the past year or more. And I expect that trend to continue. So if you're beginning your Android development at this point, you can be pretty confident by the time that you have an Android app ready to be deployed, then you probably don't have to worry very much about supporting anything older than Ice Cream Sandwich. And it doesn't matter if you need to support Ice Cream Sandwich. Again, once the programming model changed to 4, life becomes a lot simpler. During this course, I'm going to focus on this model, the Honeycomb or above, the Ice Cream Sandwich or above. I'm going to set the minimum API levels for our apps that we write as roughly 15 through 17, depending on what features we want. And while there is a support library and there are ways to support older devices, I'm going to leave that as something a bit beyond what we're going to cover. We're going to focus on something that hopefully will last you for a while, that will work with the newer versions. So now that you've seen all the different types and the different code names and the API levels, in our next section, we'll get started with the website, looking at the actual structure and where the information is, how to download the SDK, and how to get started.